Hello and welcome back to the DoneDeal YouTube channel. Today we are reviewing the second generation Lexus NX. Now this rivals things like the Audi Q5, the BMW X3, the Volvo XC60 amongst many others. It essentially lies in the mid-sized luxury SUV segment of the market. Now, Lexus have actually been making hybrid cars for almost 15 years, if not longer, and they're well renowned in that part of the market. However, this is actually their first ever plug-in hybrid. It's got a very impressive range, and in this review we're going to be discussing that. We're going to be going for a drive, checking out the luggage compartments and everything else that you need to know about the second generation Lexus NX. Now if you'd like to search for Lexuses for sale, you can hit the link up there, but let's get into the review. Now it's not just the powertrain that have changed for the second generation, but also the design, and you'll see it throughout the car. It has really dramatically improved, particularly in the interior. However, I really like the L shapes on the rear lights. However, in the brochure for Lexus, whilst they do talk about the design, they put a huge emphasis on the feeling you get when you drive. And I actually took note of every single time they talked about feeling. And I actually really agree with this. Recently we reviewed the ES and I thought it gave a sensation that a lot of other cars in the same segment don't offer. So they talk about the way it makes you feel more sophisticated, how you feel more in control, more luxurious, responsive, confident. They use a whole load of words, and it is about that, and that's why I do advise just going down to your local dealership. You can find out where they are from that link up there and going for a test drive. But for now, enjoy some cinematics to see the new design. So Lexus have produced the NX with two different options. There's a standalone hybrid, which we're not getting in Ireland, which is such a shame because I reckon it would have been about 10 grand cheaper than this. And we'll get onto the price now in a moment. But this is the plug-in hybrid. So it's a 2.5 litre naturally aspirated engine, and it's paired with an 18.1 kilowatt hour battery, which is big in the plug-in hybrid world. In fact, it'll actually go for over 70 kilometers potentially in the right conditions and in the right spec, which is very, very, very impressive, to be fair. Now, in terms of pricing, well, it's essentially available in two specs: Executive, which is what we have here, which is about 62,000 euros, and then there's F Sport, which is a little over 72,000 euros. So those are kind of the two pricing options. As I said, I wish they had made the standalone hybrid because it probably would have been closer to 50,000 euros. But nonetheless, this is really impressive. So before we take a look at the inside of the car, let's talk about charging times. In terms of charging, if you use a good old-fashioned 3-pin socket that you just put into your wall at home, you're talking about 6 hours. Now it can charge at speeds of just below 7 kilowatts, which means that you can get a full charge in about 2.5 hours if you've got a home wall box. There is no fast charger here, so that's essentially as quick as you can charge it. However, there is a third way to charge it, which we'll talk about later in the review. So the interior, the first thing I have to talk about is the doors, both on the outside and the inside. They're not actually levers. You just push the button in, and obviously if you do get stuck, that does work as a good old-fashioned door handle too. But just these little kind of quirky things actually make a car. As far as the interior goes in here, oh, it is lovely. I particularly like this two-tone. It's really sets it off. Very bright place to be. One thing I have noticed, and I did notice this with the ES, is the headspace isn't massive. And I don't know if that's because they're Japanese cars and the average population in Japan is a little bit smaller than, let's say, Norway. But I do notice that there's not great visibility out the front. The windscreen seems almost a little bit smaller, which is unusual, particularly because I'm not that tall. Anyway, in terms of the infotainment system, again here it's a big upgrade from the predecessor. So to begin with, I think they've halved the buttons, so there's way less buttons going on. In fact, it's just your climate control, your volume, and a few other little things down here, your modes, for example. Now, in terms of all your creature comforts, 2 cup holders, wireless charging here. You can also hide stuff under there. Now look at this. This is just Japanese engineering at its finest. So, you think that looks inconvenient to put your stuff in there? don't worry, Lexus have you covered. Then on the steering wheel, again, really nice. It's actually electronic, so you can kind of maneuver it around, if I can find the button, and get into the perfect spot. On the left hand side, you've got some good old school buttons, none of that haptic feedback stuff, which I really like, and that's for your volume and of course your infotainment. And then on the right, you've got all your driving accessories, so your cruise control, your lane assist, and anything else. In terms of in front of you, you've got a digital display. It has your speed, it shows you what gear you're in if you decide to drive it in manual mode, and then you've got a few different bits of information like your radio station here, so it's just a little bit easier to see. The infotainment system itself, massive upgrade. I actually think it's even a little bit better than the ES version. One thing that I do really love is it comes with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as wireless, but only for Apple. So unfortunately, discriminating against Android users there, but it is brilliant. It works very well. And I find when a car has Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, you tend to just use it the whole time. Another thing that I do like is USB-C and USB chargers, which is very, very handy. And that's the interior, so let's check out the rear. In the rear, well, again, it's a nice place to be. I definitely think this two-tone leather does really help it. It would be dark without a panoramic sunroof otherwise. The windows aren't gigantic, however, it is very practical in here. You've got a bit of storage down here, you've got some USB-C charging points and a 12-volt socket. Another thing that's a nice little feature is there's an armrest. Very comfortable, and that's, again, we go back to that feeling. It does throughout the whole cabin, whether you're in the front or the rear. It does feel very nice. Everything's quite high quality. Even things like the lock buttons don't make a noise. One other thing I want to point out, which is quite cool, is if I reach around here, I can actually recline the rear seats just ever so slightly. It's not a massive thing, but it just kind of adds to the whole experience, particularly as a rear passenger. Last to mention is there is ISOFIX points that are also very, very easy accessible. However, the doors themselves don't necessarily have the largest opening. So from the rear, I really like this light bar along the back. Now, all the new Lexus NXs come with an electric tailgate, and they've also sped it up. However, I actually want to check something before we talk about the boot, because I think on all the plug-in hybrid versions, which are all in Ireland, there should be... It's making beeps. It has it, okay. So it has a kick thing, which is actually quite handy. I've seen people do it with their shopping bags and they kick it and it works. And I think I might just close this. So that works. Anyway, in here there's 520 litres. The seats do fall down in a 60-40 split, which means you can just put one seat down if you like. There's a 12-volt socket in here, a bit of storage down there. And actually this boot lining, this is part of a package which costs €395. You get this and also some mud flaps. Don't know if it's worth that, although it is quite handy if you've got a dog or wet stuff. And in here, which I really like this because it goes over most manufacturers' heads, they have somewhere to put your charging cables, which is very, very handy. So overall, the boot is very practical. It's a good, nice open shape as well. And let's see if it works for us. These just never work. This isn't only Lexus, this is every brand ever. But nothing the touch of a button can't fix. So to drive, well, it feels really nice, and this is the same as we had in the ES. Just the way it is composed over the road, it doesn't feel necessarily very aggressive or very sporty. It just kind of wafts and glides, and everything's very quiet. I can whisper away, and it's actually raining quite a lot outside, and you probably actually can't hear it because it's very loud. It's now actually hailstone, but it's a very quiet car to drive, and it's very easy to drive. You've got great visibility, big mirrors, which are really nice. Around town, the turning circle is actually pretty decent, to be fair, particularly for the size of the SUV. And it's not really that wide, so it fits into smaller car parking spots. And if you're on a narrow road, you're not really too worried about curbing your wheels or hitting the far wing mirror. Then in terms of driving aids, like any modern car, it's full of them. So this one's got lane assist, it's also got cruise control, adaptive cruise control, there's blind spot monitoring there, it's also got accidents avoidance systems. Now, I mentioned earlier when we were talking about charging that there is a third way to charge. Now, basically what you do is you press this button down here. Press it once and it will hold your electric battery percentage. So if you want to hold it at 50%, it will hold it there. So for example, if you're on the motorway and then you want to have an electric motor to go around town, when you get there, you can just click that and hold it. But if you hold that button down for about 3 seconds, it puts on charge mode, and then it uses the combustion engine to charge the electric battery. Now that is not economically clever because paying for fuel is more expensive than paying for electricity, but it is just nice that you can do it, particularly if you don't have, let's say, a home charger, which I think for a plug-in hybrid you really do need. Now, the power is quite good, but it's got a CVT system in this, which is basically a gearbox, and the way it does it, you'll notice it's quite screechy. So earlier on when I was driving up the mountains, it sounded like I was driving a diesel. It's just quite revvy, and again, it's a quiet car, so you won't really hear it as much as I'm sure it sounds outside. But at the end of the day, you don't really ever drive it in that position. So maybe EV mode hold you'll use, and just like that, you can waft along and it's just so silent. Now as I come to a halt here, I want to point out one or two things that are little kind of niggles. So the first is that there's not really any regenerative braking, and I think in a plug-in hybrid that's almost essential. If you don't know what it is, check out our video on Electric Cars 101, that'll teach you. But basically you have to use the pedal to stop, which I know sounds a bit ridiculous because that's normal, but in new cars you don't always have to do that. Now when I then take my foot off the brake, it sets off. Now that's perfectly normal. However, there is this button down here where you click to hold, and then it will hold you there like right now. However, every time that you turn off the car and then turn it back on, you have to reset that. And that is a little bit frustrating, and it doesn't happen in a Volkswagen or a Mercedes or whatever else that you might be driving. Those two little niggles aside, it is lovely to drive. And actually, one thing I do want to discuss is the fact that it's a plug-in hybrid, and I've had a few people recently say to me, I'm doing a lot of motorway mileage, I think I'm going to get a plug-in hybrid. Now the thing about a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid is they're actually most efficient and most worthwhile if you're doing a lot of around town driving in and out of the city. Once you take it out onto the motorway, you're actually just dragging that big battery and the extra weight around, and you're not really using the electric motor because they don't work that efficiently there. So my advice would be, if you're looking at something like this, then definitely you kind of want to be based in and around a town and maybe do the odd long motorway journey. But anyway, that is everything you need to know about driving the new Lexus NX. It definitely is a glorious machine to drive, and I actually have a big trip to Kerry tomorrow, which I'm very much looking forward to. Built on the same platform as the much loved Toyota RAV4, the Lexus NX just has a few more bells and whistles, and as much as I joked about the way it makes you feel, that's something I think that Lexus have grasped very well. From so far the two cars that I have reviewed from them, you just get this different sensation, this different feeling when you're driving it than you do with any other cars. And I do advise going for a test drive, but as a whole I think it's brilliant. I wish they did bring the standalone hybrid. Now people might argue, oh well, they wouldn't have sold as many, but it would have made it a little bit more obtainable to maybe some more budget customers. Maybe that's a protection thing for the RAV4. I actually don't know the internal politics, but I do think this looks absolutely brilliant. The S-Sport ones look great if you're willing to splurge over 70,000 euros. And as a whole, it's been lovely to drive. I hope you've enjoyed this review. If you have, please make sure to subscribe, give the videos a thumbs up, and of course hit the bell notification so that you get notified every time we upload a new video. But for now, that's all from me. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.